My dearly beloved friends, I'll be honest with you. I struggled writing this sermon. It was hard to know how or where to begin or what to say in a time like this. There's so much for us all to grieve, so much to process, so much to heal. Waking up just over a week ago to the news of the horrible mass shooting in our community, I was worried that we'd have friends, if not community members, impacted. And as you've heard, our own dear Cara Thaxton was at the borderline that fateful night. But miraculously and blessedly, she found a way out to safety and is with us here today. And we're so grateful. And yet we know that many communities and parents were not so lucky to see their children again after that horrible night. And that just breaks our hearts. It simply breaks our hearts that more innocent lives have been lost to senseless violence. And then just a few hours later, the fires broke out. And the very same people impacted by a mass shooting now had to evacuate. There was no time to grieve the first disaster, and many of us had to leave our homes to run away from yet another threat to our lives. We legitimately feared for our families, our homes, our fellowship, and our neighborhoods, our whole community scrambling for safety in yet another way. When tragedies happen so fast, one on top of the other with barely a moment to breathe in between, let alone mourn, it can be overwhelming and numbing. And when they come in the midst of an already fractious, scary time in our nation, it can be extremely disorienting and utterly exhausting. I've heard from some of you that it's been hard to find your equilibrium in the midst of it all. Understandably. I've heard others share that anxiety and depression have flared up as you wrestle with all that descended upon our Conejo Valley. And during times of extreme stress such as these, it's hard to find your footing. It's hard to stay calm and know what to do next. And it can be difficult to think clearly or remember things. When our lives are at risk and we watch helplessly as others are harmed, most of us go into our reptilian, instinctual brains to fight or take flight for survival. Thank goodness for that instinct. But our more rational faculties can also shut down and our judgment can be clouded. Just like when you're grieving the loss of a loved one. Thinking can be fuzzy and distracted because we're in shock. We're all in a state of shock right now and profound grief for what's happened to our community. So during these times, it's especially important to slow down, to feel your feet on the ground, on our beautiful Mother Earth who continues to hold us up, and to take a deep breath before you act. Take a deep breath with me now. Like many of you, I've been aware of the chaos in my own mind this week. Heightened anxiety and a lack of clarity. I've struggled to find my balance in the midst of it all. How to find hope and comfort and then be able to come and share that with you. And as I was reflecting, I realized I needed to come back to simple tools, to simple ideas. So I want to share with you what I found to help develop some courage and resilience in the hope that it can be of use to you too. In sum, what I discovered was to remember to look and remember the good. To remember that we are not alone. and to remember to find and look for our spiritual center. What a blessing that we're focusing on the theme of memory this month, right? It's an awful strange coincidence how the themes that we focus on each month somehow seem to live themselves out during the month. So remembering is an important tool. And the poetry of David Whyte is especially inspiring in difficult times. He wrote an evocative poem called The Well of Grief, which helps me remember these ideas. Let me share it with you. Those who will not slip beneath the still surface on the well of grief, turning down through its black water to the place we cannot breathe, will never know the source from which we drink, the secret water, cold and clear, nor find in the darkness glimmering the small round coins thrown by those who wished for something else. Whyte encourages us to go beneath the surface of our grief and feel it deeply. Because in the depths, we can find the treasures that we might not discover if we just stay on the surface. So I ask you, my friends, have you had a chance to dive down into the deep black water of grief this week? Have you gone down to the source and found some secret waters, cold and clear, to sustain you? What are the small round coins that you've discovered in the darkness, glimmering? The coins that give you hope and courage at this time? As I struggled deep in the well of grief, I found, first of all, that there is still good all around us. Just like in our story earlier where the rhino was helped by his friends, I was reminded that there's so many good people everywhere. Our daily news and recent events would have us believe that the world is made of terror and tragedy, of mostly bad people doing terrible things. But paying attention to that alone can have us feel that our world is constantly imploding and dangerous. But there is so much good too. And when we dive deep into the well of grief, we can remember that good too. We can find the tiny rays of shimmering light through the darkness to lighten our drowning spirits. One of the great lessons that Mr. Rogers, the children's TV icon, was taught by his mother and shared with his children worldwide was to look for the helpers in times of crisis. Look for the helpers. And the helpers restore our faith in goodness. And we've seen so many helpers appear through all of this. They're good people, firefighters, police, first responders, emergency workers, doctors, teachers, therapists, faith leaders, and many neighbors and friends who spring to help one another in times of crisis. So many of you have been helpers. Thanks to Chuck Fernald for checking on our fellowship that fiery Thursday night. He saved our buildings from a burning bush just behind the congregation, and it wasn't the kind of burning bush you'd want to see. Thanks to his quick response, firefighters got here to put it out and saved our buildings. Yes. Thank you, Chuck. There are so many good people who are willing to put their community and their neighbors' well-being ahead of their own. In fact, one of my colleagues at our interfaith gathering this week shared that she had a neighbor whom she'd always had a really hard time with. But during the Hill Fire, she lives in the Vallecito Mobile Home Park, this very neighbor, the one she hated, stood on the roof of her house with a hose to put out the fire that was trying to destroy her home. He risked his life to protect her home, and now she said she loves him. But I hope it isn't going to take us that much tragedy to get us to love other people. The most unexpected helpers arrive during times of crisis, don't they? My friends, look for those helpers. They are the shimmering light in the dark waters. But White also reminds us about the source of secret, cold, and clear waters. And every time I say that, I get thirsty because it sounds so good. And they are in the depths of the dark well. Just when you think you've gone so deep, there are these secret, clear, and cold waters. And I ask you, where have you found this source of respite amidst the horror? For me, during these tragedies, I found clarity and relief in realizing that I was not alone. As soon as the shooting happened, the UUA president, Reverend Susan Frederick Gray, called me, asking how the UUA might support our congregation and community at this time. And then countless ministers from all over the country, many of whom had dealt with tragedies in their own communities, contacted me to offer support and counsel. And then the UUA Trauma Ministry Team, who are a group of volunteer ministers that counsel congregations and ministers in times of trauma, phoned me to see how they could help. And then, of course, local congregations, our neighbors up and down in this area, reached out to see if they could house anyone displaced. The wider UU community was extraordinary, and so were all of you. When I came back early from my business trip, because I was so worried about all of you and wanted to be here to help, another minister brought me to church from LAX. And they helped me find calm and clarity down in the black waters where it was hard to see. And they buoyed me up enough to figure out what to do next in the unfolding emergencies. And of course, I find hope in all of you. How we all came together to help one another and be there for each other during this time. And hope and gratitude to my husband, too, who stands by my side through all of this. But I find hope in all of you that those who didn't have to evacuate opened their homes to those who did, and everyone was helping in any way they could. My friends, there is so much good all around us. We must simply allow ourselves to remember and look for it, even amidst anguish and fear. White also suggests that we find glimmering coins down in the depths, thrown there with others' wishes and hopes. I discover those coins in the spiritual practices that help me find my center in the midst of it all. Now, for some of us, that is prayer, or meditation, or reading sacred texts, or poetry, or indeed writing poetry. For others, it may be a creative outlet like singing, or knitting, or writing. I played and sang along with soothing chants, music that helped my racing mind feel calmer. I meditated, trying to be mindful of the good and the bad coexisting. And I had to keep reminding myself that it was not all bad. When looking at the huge, imposing smoke plumes, I tried to consciously shift my perspective to also take in the blue skies nearby. Peace and beauty coexisted amidst fury and destruction. We just have to look for it. It's really important not to let fear grab all of our attention. The good is still there amongst everything. And it also helped me to focus on one breath at a time and to deepen my shallow breathing. I don't know if you all notice, but breathing gets very shallow during anxious times. So just to remind ourselves to breathe deeply. Even in the midst of fear, we can become mindful that our breath continues on, that our life force, our breath remains. So let's take another deep breath together right now. Let it nourish you. And we can also focus on the small, ordinary things that are easy to take for granted. We can look at our hands, feel our bodies alive and pulsing, and notice our feet on the ground. We can become aware of each moment of calm amidst the storm. And notice nature and animals all around us, birds flying by, or butterflies flapping their wings, or trees, beautiful trees that escaped the fires. Notice that life in its simplest, purest form goes on. And then be grateful for that. Life and goodness coexist with pain. Life goes on. Despite the shooting, despite the fires, despite the frightening political times, despite illness, despite fear and uncertainty, life and goodness are all around us, continuing to glimmer in the darkness, continuing to offer us cool, clear waters, reminding ourselves to be grateful for those small mercies, to be grateful for ordinary beauty, can be such a soothing balm amidst arid times. So as we come to celebrate Thanksgiving together this week, I invite us to be deeply grateful for the goodness that surrounds us, grateful for the helpers and that we are not alone, grateful for whatever spiritual source sustains us. Gratitude makes us more resilient. It's been proven scientifically, and it makes us more content and healthy. And it can change our mood and lift our spirits. So keep looking for what you're grateful for. And I also invite us to regularly check in with each other and offer one another extra hugs, to be especially kind and gentle with one another, to be grateful for community, for family and friends, for the helpers, and all the goods amidst the rubble. Personally, I'm going to be giving thanks for all of you this Thanksgiving. You are such a blessing in my life. Thank you for your courage. Thank you for your dedication and your willingness to be there for each other and help in so many ways. We are so blessed to share this community of life and love, this community of meaning and purpose. We have a place to come together to find solace, healing, and connection. A place to walk with one another through the ups and downs of life. My friends, may we continue to be a safe harbor for one another and a welcoming beacon of light for all people of goodwill who need us. May it be so.